He's got this addiction to the omnipotent power where he thinks he's actually God and he is in control.
The only screaming was, please don't kill, do anything, but don't kill me. Some of them will pray to me like a god.
September the 17th, 1995, 12 miles east of Johannesburg, South Africa, a police reservist is taking the day off to hunt rabbits in one of the vast fields called a veld. Suddenly, the stench of decomposing flesh fills the air. Women's bodies at varying degrees of decomposition lay before him. Some were quite fresh, some were dehydrated, and some were skeletons. Police arrived quickly and fanned out over the area. They believed this killing field was the work of a serial killer they had been tracking for more than a year. Initially, they had found victims one by one, but this discovery demonstrated that the killer had become more adept and more daring. The bodies of 30 women have now been found in similar fields from Johannesburg to Pretoria. The victims were between the ages of 19 and 43. All had been strangled with articles of clothing, such as panties, bras, and stockings. Leon Nell was the lead investigator on the case.
He used sticks to actually wind the stocking and or clothing around their necks.
The first body connected to the killer was found on July the 16th, 1994, outside Johannesburg. Soon after, 2 more victims turned up. Superintendent Vinyl Fuljoen began to see a pattern.
Were similar to each other. We started looking into the fact that it can be a serial killer.
One young mother had her hands bound with her own brassiere. A few feet away was the body of her infant son. As the year went on, police discovered a body every 2 weeks, then once a week, then 2 every week.
Yes, I'm very afraid. I can't even walk in the night. I think he's making all the women scared, and then I don't feel very good about it. And when we go around in town or whatever, because we don't know where he stays, so I'm very scared and don't know what to do.
Struggle to find that man. Yeah, they must fight to get him.
The police can't cope with this type of criminal activity without the wholehearted support of the community, and we would like to appeal to the community once again to come forward with any portion of possible information.
So brutal were the crimes that President Nelson Mandela made a personal visit to the desolate killing field. Investigators had found DNA evidence and many leads, but no clear suspects.
We didn't know who we were looking for. It could be anybody.
It's a race against time to catch him before he kills another innocent person.
Then, while sifting through evidence, police investigator Leon Nell remembered a recent news story about a missing woman.
There was an article in the Star newspaper about a lady, Trafina Mokgotsi. She disappeared under very suspicious circumstances.
Nell wondered if Mokgotsi could be another victim of the serial killer and decided to question her co-workers. One of them remembered a man who had come to their workplace and offered Mokgotsi a job just days before she disappeared. Mismatched stories told by the family members of other victims were investigated, but this time Mokgotsi's friend Esther Malongo remembered a name.
He told us that he's Moses Sithole. He told us his name.
Nell ran a check on the name Moses Sithole and uncovered a man who had been convicted of assault. Police showed Sithole's picture to Mokgotsi's co-workers and they positively identified him. Detectives went to Sithole's home but found that he had left his common-law wife Martha and his daughter Brigitte a few weeks before. Sithole seemed to be one step ahead of them. Investigators put Sithole's picture on the front page of newspapers all over the country.
Every day that he's out and walking around the streets of South Africa, it can be another female that fall victim to him. And it became an obsession to me to apprehend him as quick as possible, to stop him from killing another innocent person.
In October 1995, South African police were on the trail of suspected serial killer Moses Sithole. They knew his name but had no idea where he was. Then, on October the 18th, after receiving a tip from Sithole's brother-in-law, detectives were finally able to arrest Sithole. The man suspected of murdering 37 women and 1 child was finally in custody. Esther Mshlongo, a friend of one of the victims, was relieved to hear the news.
The woman I'm working with, we were screaming, saying that that's it, they catch him. At last, we're going to be safe now.
Whilst Sithole awaited trial, a fellow inmate managed to secretly videotape an interview with him.
They offer you money? No. But you didn't want sex from them, that's one thing.
No, I didn't go for, I was not in a holiday. So I was cross, I was hurt, I was aggressive.
Sithole felt that he had been betrayed by women his whole life, and that his hatred was justified.
When we try to understand a serial killer, or any criminal for that matter, things have to be looked at. How and where this person grew up.
Moses was the 4th child of Sophie and Simon Sithole. He was born on November the 17th, 1964, in the South African township of Vosloorus. Moses was a bright, curious boy, but had few opportunities for education. Life within his tin roof home was difficult.
He'd been abused by his mother, who he says was an alcoholic, from a stepsister that he says abused him, from being raped by a woman in his younger years.
When he was 6 years old, Moses' father died. Since Simon Sithole was the sole provider, Sophie and her 6 children were evicted from their home. Moses spent the remainder of his childhood bouncing from one poorly run youth home to another. Sithole described these conditions more than 20 years later during his prison interview.
The treatment was bad, really bad. You had to be strong to survive.
Moses escaped when he was about 8 years old and tried to return to his mother. He made his way home, crossing vast velds and passing through shanty towns. But there was no joyous reunion. Instead, his mother sent the boy back to the orphanage.
Hurt has been my daily bread. Hurt has been my prayer. Every minute, every second, every day, every week, every month, and every year.
Because of a feeling of powerlessness, starts to fantasize about a way to obtain power.
When he was about 11, Moses was moved to yet another orphanage in KwaZulu-Natal, near the Indian Ocean. In his early teens, Moses ran away again. He hitchhiked 300 miles back to Vosloorus to stay with his older brother Patrick. On his own, Moses worked menial jobs, trained as an amateur boxer to build his strength, and became popular with the local women for his charm and disarming smile.
I can tell you he is a very intelligent man. Well-spoken. He was a member of the library in Pretoria. He took out classical music CDs.
However, his friendly demeanor hid a warped view of women. He was quick to anger, and the slightest rejection from a woman could trigger a violent rage. The first time Sithole acted on these impulses was in 1987, when he attacked his girlfriend's sister, 38-year-old Patricia Khumalo.
He lured her to the mine dump in Cleveland, Johannesburg, where he
left Khumalo tied up with her clothing thrown over her face. She managed to escape, but never went to the authorities, fearing for her life. Sithole had not yet killed, but like other serial killers, this first crime established a pattern that would become more violent and complex over the next 8 years.
Serial killers all have a fantasy, which is the basic blueprint of what they do. The problem is, reality is never as perfect as fantasy. So they keep on repeating it in order to get it right, to get it perfect. And the problem is, it will never be as perfect as it is in your fantasy.
A desolate veld outside Johannesburg would soon become a stage for Moses Sithole's twisted fantasies of power and death. In 1987, 22-year-old Moses Sithole violently violated his first victim. Because she was too afraid to tell the police, Sithole was able to violate another woman. His actions became more violent over time. His third victim, Lindiwe Nkosi, was another girlfriend's sister. He lured her to a remote spot, threatened to pour gasoline on her and set her on fire if she didn't submit. After violating Nkosi, he choked her until she lost consciousness. When she revived, he told her he would kill her if she went to the authorities. She too kept silent. Emboldened, Sithole committed more violent assaults.
There's an incredible tension building up in him. It's almost like an urge. He must get to this point where he is going to stalk, to find a person, the right person, and also all the tension and planning that goes behind getting the right person and then actually acting out the plan that he has been fantasizing.
Investigator Leon Null would see that Sithole's victims fit a profile.
Sithole would go for ladies that were looking for work. They were easy targets.
Sithole met Doris Swakamisa in February of 1989 when he worked as a store clerk. He told Doris he was a successful businessman from a neighboring town and promised her employment. Sithole offered to personally escort her to her new job. When they arrived at the train station, Sithole told Doris they could take a shortcut through the veld. Once they had walked far enough so no one would hear her screams, Sithole pulled out a knife hidden in a folded newspaper and told Doris he was going to violate her. Sithole tied Doris's hands with her underwear, then violently violated her. He claimed he would not kill her if she promised not to tell anyone, and then left her in the veld with her hands and feet bound. 3 months later, Doris Swakamisa spotted Moses Sithole in a shop in downtown Johannesburg and called the police. In the South African town of Cleveland, where the assault took place, Sithole was arrested.
He was loaded with the victim in the back of a police vehicle. On the way to the Cleveland police station, he then said to her, I should have killed you.
Sithole claimed he was innocent, saying Doris had picked the wrong man, but the judge didn't believe his story. Sithole was sentenced to 7 years in prison. This perceived injustice became another betrayal in his mind, one that deepened his anger. In prison, Sithole insisted that he hadn't hurt anyone. His warped view of women apparently kept him from seeing the irony of his own statements.
I regret not having killed the first lady that falsely accused me.
Sithole had used fear to control the woman he violated. Now he became the victim. Sithole would later tell Superintendent Vinyl Viljoen about that difficult time.
He was by co-inmates, assaulted and rejected by them for being a rapist.
Sithole outwardly maintained his calm demeanor. To the guards, he appeared to be a model prisoner, dividing his time between concentrating on survival and cultivating his rage. On one visitor's day, he met Martha, the sister of another inmate. After his release in November 1993, he moved in with Martha, over the objections of her family.
Her family was not exactly satisfied that Martha could love me. Her mother's objection that I came from prison. How could she love me?
Although the couple was not legally married, she was considered to be Sithole's wife. He soon began working with Martha's brother, fixing cars in the yard of her father's home. It was a humble beginning, but it seems Sithole was starting a new life. Across South Africa, it was a time of unprecedented hope.
Democracy at freedom ball! I stand here before you not as a prophet, but as a humble servant.
It was a newfound freedom and provided a different kind of opportunity. For the first time, black South Africans felt they were able to travel freely across the country. Many small-town women came to the cities looking for work. Their naivete and gentle country manners made them especially vulnerable to a sexual predator like Sithole. After a few months, Sithole stopped working as a mechanic. Each morning, he left the house with a folded newspaper under his arm. He claimed to be looking for work, but he was actually preparing to commit his first murder. Like many other serial killers, Sithole focused his rage on the most marginal groups in his society, in this case, unemployed black women.
For every crime, there's a build-up of tension. They experience certain trigger events. It could be a conflict with a female or even just another person, which acts as the final trigger as to why they go and commit the murders.
In early July 1994, Sithole met 19-year-old Maria Manama on the streets of Pretoria.
He had a type of personality that people, and specifically women, could fall for very easily.
Sithole, who introduced himself as Sylvester, was neatly dressed. He charmed the young woman and her family.
Was able to make himself into this presentable person that middle-class people were able to invite into their homes and even contemplate having their daughter date or entrusting their child to his care.
Soon after, Sithole lured Maria to his remote veld and strangled her. It was his first murder.
It's sort of a masterpiece of a thing that happens during the day and no one can see. Even if there were people around, it's so quick that it takes a split of a second to put everything under control.
When Maria's body was found, there was a cryptic note scrawled on her leg. "I am not fighting with you. We will stay here until you understand." Sithole reveled in his first kill and began planning his next one.
After he committed the act, the fantasizing takes basically control of his life. The acts just become more violent, more gruesome, more grisly, because he needs his urge to be satisfied. He's got this addiction to the omnipotent power where he thinks he's actually God and he is in control.
The only screaming was, "Please, don't kill. Do anything, but don't kill me." Some of them will pray to me like a god.
By July 1994, South African Moses Sithole had progressed from violating women to murder. Over the next 4 months, he assaulted and strangled 5 women. Inspector Leon Nell was part of a manhunt for the elusive serial killer. Sithole had managed to stay one step ahead of police.
Right from the outset, we had problems. We were busy with the post-mortem in Johannesburg mortuary, and then they would call, there's another scene.
The police would go and remove the body, process the crime scene, and 2 days later you'd have a body at the same spot. That's very arrogant.
The local newspapers gave detailed accounts about how the killer cleverly lured his victims into the veld. The notoriety only fueled Sithole's desire for violence.
Very often serial killers are thrill-seeking. They love the media attention. They absolutely adore to be the pivot around which so much activity goes on.
As Sithole grew more adept at killing, he developed an intricate system for attracting victims. First, he would approach a woman who was looking for work and claim to have a high-paying job for her. Then he would slowly earn her trust. After interviewing relatives of Sithole's victims, Police Superintendent Vinyl Viljoen noticed a pattern.
He says he'll be able to help her to get work. Then he'll make another appointment with her. Then they'll sit and just discuss ordinary things, drink cold drinks, and then make another appointment. Then he'll say to her, okay, let me take you to where I can get you a work.
In the final phase, Sithole would arrange to meet the woman in a crowded area where they wouldn't be noticed. Sithole would then flag down one of the hundreds of minibuses that work as taxis in the areas of Johannesburg. Investigators believed that Sithole acted out this elaborate hoax because he found pleasure in manipulating his victims.
So we mustn't just isolate the rape and the murder as the crime, but rather what happens before, during and after. Even while he's walking with his victims, he's already successful. He's convincing them to come with him.
Sithole would have the minibus drop them off near an opening to the veld. Not an uncommon request, as footpaths through the fields were often used as shortcuts. He would lead his victim down the path and out of sight, then take out his knife and make her disrobe.
He could not just control the life of the woman that he was about to kill, but he also could control her emotions. He could make her so scared, most probably pleading for help, but it must have increased his feeling of being powerful tremendously.
After violating the woman, he would often strangle her with her own underwear.
When you strangle a person, you can actually release your hold and the person will regain consciousness. And if you put pressure, they can actually lose consciousness again. So you can extend the period of death. It's every serial killer's fantasy.
Sithole would torture his victim. He had learned how to kill slowly.
He used quite sophisticated systems where he would take the strap from the victim's handbag, put it around their neck, and tie it to a low branch on a tree.
It was another technique that would prolong Sithole's sensation of ultimate power.
And he would sit and watch while the victim stood there, and eventually after an hour or two the victim was unable to stand upright any longer and would lower themselves and actually strangle themselves.
At a certain point, violating women and murder were not enough for Sithole. He began to taunt the families of his victims. He called the grandmother of one woman and told her, "It serves you well. You are now walking over the grave of Monica." Sithole now believed he could manipulate anyone at will.
Moses Sithole also once phoned the police anonymously and gave them a name of his brother-in-law or somebody, which the detectives actually picked up and interrogated. And when the guy got home, he would tell Moses Sithole about the interrogation, which I think was a very clever way for Moses to find out what do they know and what do they ask.
But his friends and relatives still believed that he was leaving the house each day to look for work. On December the 5th, 1994, his wife Martha gave birth to a baby girl. She had no idea her husband was a killer. By July 1995, Moses Sithole had strangled 18 young women and discarded their bodies in the fields outside of Pretoria and Johannesburg. Police pursued every lead they had, but still couldn't put a name or face on the killer.
The detectives and myself, we do get very demoralized. It is a very stressful period, especially if it is extended. And you do eventually feel responsible for the women who killed. It's another innocent life.
Whenever a serial killer is on the loose, the community in which such a person operates is becoming extremely frightened.
We have to be actually careful that we don't walk at night alone. We don't do that things that will actually make us to be targets.
But the African woman had become more cautious, and Sithole needed a more sophisticated plan for luring his victims. He read the newspaper daily and kept abreast of the changing conditions in the country. In time, he began to see a way to take advantage of the social reform. Sithole, who had grown up mostly in orphanages, invented a fictitious social service agency called Youth Against Human Abuse. The supposed mission of the organization was to reunite orphans with their families. He claimed he was looking for new employees and began distributing phony job applications to women. In 1995, Sithole got in touch with a prominent photographer and introduced himself and his organization. He told the man that he needed to find a group home for 2 homeless children. The photographer helped him get access to a children's home called Kids Haven. Outside the center's laundry, he met Trifina Mahotsi, a single mother who supported an extended family by working at Kids Haven. Trifina's friend and co-worker, Esther Mshlongo, remembers that day.
She was staying with her mother and 1 sister and 2 brothers in Pedoza. And she was the only person who was working.
Sithole offered Trifina a hefty bonus if she would come work for Youth Against Human Abuse. Trifina quickly took an application.
She was thinking I'm going to support all my family. So she was happy, very much happy.
Sithole returned the next day to tell Trifina that her application had been accepted. He made an appointment to take her to her new job and said he would meet her at the train station so they could travel together.
I was very much jealous about Trifina. She's going to get a new job and a huge money like that.
But right after that, Trifina was never heard of again. Her disappearance eventually led investigators to Moses Sithole. By August 1995, Moses Sithole had killed 20 women and dumped their bodies in isolated areas around Johannesburg. On the morning of the 15th, he left his home in Atteridgeville and took the train to Benoni to meet Trifina Mahotsi. Sithole had promised to take her to her new job, but instead he led her into a remote field and strangled her. When Trifina didn't come home, her sister Naketsi began to worry.
We started to panic and my mother stood up and went to the police stations.
The newspapers published a photo of the missing woman. 1 month later, a police reservist stumbled across a field near Boksburg prison, littered with bodies. Trifina Mahotsi's body was one of the 10 found there. The black community held a prayer vigil for the murdered woman and demanded swift justice.
As a black man in that community, if I know that you did that to my sister, my mother, my daughter, I'm not going to wait for the police to come and give me any kind of justice. I will get people together and you will be punished.
Inspector Leon Nell and his team canvassed a children's home called Kids Haven, where Trifina had worked. Through her co-workers, police learned that on the day she disappeared, she had gone to meet a man named Moses Sithole. But Sithole is a common name in South Africa, so they returned to the facility and passed around a mugshot of a specific man, a Moses Sithole, who had been arrested for assault in 1989.
We showed it to the people at Kids Haven, Esther Mshlongo, and the other relevant people that pointed him out, and that's how we knew it was Moses Sithole.
Authorities finally knew the identity of the serial killer they had been seeking for over a year. But as investigators closed in, Sithole developed a new scheme to evade capture. He called members of the press in an attempt to gain information about the investigation.
I answered the phone and I heard the words, "I'm the man that everyone is looking for."
The person on the other end of the line introduced himself as Joseph and claimed to be responsible for the murders.
It was like alarm bells ringing in my head, like, get your typing fingers going, get your wits about you.
De Beer quickly began to transcribe the call. Over the next days, she and the killer would have 3 lengthy conversations.
He would call from a phone booth, and there was a degree of trust that we were building up. He was a very well-spoken, charming person on the telephone. I mean, he had an accent, so English wasn't his first language. So I imagine in his first language he was quite charming.
He told De Beer he was killing out of revenge for being wrongly convicted of sexual assault. He claimed the murders were committed to draw attention to the injustice he had suffered.
He didn't want to be caught by the police. That was in fact his motive for calling. He wanted to outsmart them.
De Beer thought it might be a hoax, but the caller gave vivid descriptions of the killings. As the calls continued, Sithole confided more and more to 26-year-old De Beer.
She described how some women would fight, other women would just give up. It was of some interest to him, I think, how certain women would respond and others would fight. I remember him saying that some women were as strong as men, and he really struggled with them.
De Beer contacted the police and gave them transcripts of the conversations. Still, they were not certain that she was dealing with the actual killer. The next time Joseph called, she asked him to prove he was the serial murderer. He then told her the location of a body in the Eastern Rand area of Johannesburg that the police had not yet found.
It wasn't a recent victim. He said there was a piece of metal over her body and that he had gone back and he had lifted up the piece of metal and found her there, and she was basically a skeleton at this point.
De Beer relayed the information to the authorities. After several searches, investigators discovered the woman in a veld outside Johannesburg.
He then described where another body was, a relatively fresh one, that she was hanging half in a tree.
Police found that body just as Joseph described. It was the killer's latest victim, a 31-year-old woman who had disappeared just the day before. Police were waiting nearby when Sithole contacted De Beer for the third time. When the money ran out on Sithole's payphone, De Beer asked him for a number to call him back, and he gave it to her. Investigators traced the number to a nearby train station. De Beer kept Sithole on the line while officers rushed to the station.
He said, hang on, and the phone went dead. There was nothing. And I remember on the line going, hello, 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 hello.
De Beer was upset. During the course of their phone conversations, she had begun to feel empathy for him.
I was quite alarmed that perhaps the police had shot him. And I remember thinking, no, shame, this poor man out there, this lost, broken person, which of course he was, but he was also a monster.
Sithole was now on the run, and police were desperate to catch him before he killed again. On October the 13th, 1995, his photo appeared on television and in newspapers from Johannesburg to Pretoria. That evening, Tamsin De Beer's phone rang again.
This Joseph character basically shouted at me about how could I have done that. But what did I do? We had a trust going. I broke the trust.
A few days later, Moses Sithole got in touch with his brother-in-law, Maxwell Makabani, hoping to get a gun. Makabani told Sithole he would help. He arranged to meet Sithole at the factory where he worked. Maxwell then called the police. Undercover police officer Francis Maluketsi was posted at the gate, ready to arrest the murderer. When Sithole arrived, he sensed the trap and fled. He ran into a dark alley. Officer Maluketsi was behind him. Suddenly Sithole turned and took a swipe at the officer with an axe. In response, Maluketsi fired several shots. Sithole was hit in the abdomen and the leg. Police rushed him to hospital. Vinal Viljoen tried to interrogate Sithole, but he was uncooperative.
I asked him, Moses, did we find all the victims? So his answer to me was, I don't know. And I started thinking, what does he mean by I don't know? So I asked him again, Moses, did we find all the victims? And he said to me, I don't know, because I wasn't with you.
Investigators reasoned that since Sithole's victims were women, a female detective might be better able to draw him out. The strategy worked. He became aroused at the thought of his crimes and touched himself while describing them to her.
He started bragging to her how he killed them, what he did, and that sort of thing.
When asked why he sexually assaulted and strangled 37 women, Moses Sithole said, I did it to teach them a lesson. On October the 18th, 1995, serial killer Moses Sithole was shot during his arrest. After recovering from his wounds, Sithole was transferred to a prison near Pretoria to await trial. There he received numerous death threats from angry citizens. Sithole was heavily guarded by an elite police unit. Leon Nell remembers the tense situation.
We did not want anything to happen to Moses. We wanted to have a fair trial.
While in prison, a fellow inmate, Derek Skuman, gained Sithole's confidence. He managed to smuggle recording equipment into the prison and tape their conversations.
Strangle? Who beat him? No, I didn't beat anybody. Just strangle? Yeah. How long does it take somebody to die if you strangle them?
A few minutes.
Is it?
Yeah, plus 5 minutes is too much.
Sithole described his intense anger toward women.
I fully hate a black woman. A woman can hurt you more than a man, more than anybody in this world.
On October the 21st, 1996, Moses Sithole was charged in the Pretoria High Court with 38 murders and 40 sexual assaults.
There was much more ladies he raped and killed that we knew about, but there wasn't sufficient evidence to obviously charge him on these cases.
More than 140 witnesses testified for the state, including Trafina Makhutzi's best friend, Esther Mshlango.
When we go to the court with Moses Sithole, I was very much scared, but I did go through this court thing, and then we went inside, and then Moses Sithole, he was there.
Sithole did his best to intimidate the witnesses.
When I was giving my story, and then he was just laughing at me, and he was shaking his head.
DNA links Sithole to the murders, but his jailhouse confession was the most chilling evidence. In the video, he appears relaxed as he boasts about his crimes.
If he's writing on the spot and the decision, the final decision not here, she must die. She can see it. I she died, and she can see it. No chance. Nothing will help her.
Sithole said one of the women knew karate and that he had struggled with her for hours.
Yeah, I gave her a chance to fight. And when we fight, I tell her, if you lose, you die.
Outside the courtroom, women banded together and voiced their anger in song. Here they were chanting, "Why are you killing us?" When the crowds heard about Sithole's arrogance, they demanded the judge turn him over so they could punish him themselves. The death penalty had recently been abolished in a post-apartheid South Africa, but the court made certain Sithole would never kill again. On December the 5th, 1997, with his defense attorney Eben Jordan nearby, Moses Sithole was sentenced to 2,410 years in prison.
He was shocked. He believed throughout that he would be acquitted.
I was feeling like that time, that they must kill him too. Because some of the women, they left their children, they left their families because of him.
Yes, we're happy about the sentence, but we have lost our sister, and my mother lost her daughter.
Sithole was taken from court to the maximum security facility of Pretoria Central Prison, where he was held without chance of pardon or parole. Diagnosed with AIDS after his arrest, Sithole received antiviral drugs and benefited from the prison hospital. His wife Martha and their daughter were not so lucky. They did not have the money for medications.
He could have made himself into the person that he pretended to be.
Instead, he took the lives of 37 women and 1 child, spreading heartbreak and fear throughout his community.
I feel so painful when I remember my daughter going out saying he's going to look for work, and he never came back.
Who they are, where they are from, I didn't care. It's just the type of woman that reminds me of the woman who falsely accused me. And then I just kill her.
It is very important to understand they need to feel in control of everything. Feeling in control not only of the woman he was killing and raping, but of the whole world around him.
We cannot say that there's a cause and effect between being abused as a child and then later becoming a criminal, because so many people successfully overcome what has happened to them as children.
I was out there to do a job, the job that has been done to me, the thing that I have to give back, eye for eye.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss another video. Till next time, take care and stay safe.